All right, everybody, I know this is kind of a weird angle, but I'm over here. Hi. Um, and this is going to be a tutorial on how Atomic Eyes is done. In advance, this is going to be actually filmed in several parts and pieced together into one coherent narrative, but I'll try to give you an idea about how much time has passed between each part. So, as we're going to start out, I want to talk about a few things, right? When we start Atomic Eyes, the first thing that has to happen are all of the little embedded pieces need to be made first for the entire batch. I'm making these for Murder of Crows, and I need to make 4 full-size bars with Andy heads, 4 full-size bars without Andy heads, and 9, which is a full tray of minis which don't contain Andy heads. That means that I need to use all 3 of these molds. If you were at Darkside, you saw the positives for these. This is the Andy head mold, and these are the 2 separate pieces for each of the heartbeats. What you probably, the Andy head mold is perfectly fine. I mean, it fits right in here in this is how I made it. It goes in. There's nothing wrong with this mold. This is just the positive. I keep it around in case I ever have to remake it. But these are kind of a problem. The way that these were made was that they were designed to snap together like this. See, that looks great, right? Really easy and neat. Here, I'll bring it closer to the camera. They were designed to fit together in this way. And that's how I molded them. I molded them basically where, it's actually this way. This one is here, and this one is here. But I accidentally put one in upside down, like this. This has led to more problems than you imagine it would. It has increased the production time on these immensely. And the same exact thing actually happened to these. These are designed to fit together like this. Just like that. And yet, on this one, this is correct, but this one is backwards. It goes into the mold the wrong way. So on both of these, there's one piece that's backwards, and the mold glue is so expensive. Every pound of it is $40. So it's a 2-part mold compound. So each part of it has half a pound each, and the set is $40 a pop. And these are just so big that I just couldn't really easily afford to remold them. So it's wound up costing me tremendous amounts of time in trimming and piecing them back together. You'll see later just exactly how much time this takes me. At some point I will remold it just to save myself the time, and at the moment this is what we're going to be dealing with. So I have 2 containers that I use specifically for Atomic Eyes. With these dedicated, I just keep them around all the time because I don't use them for anything else. There's 2 colors that go into the embeds of Atomic Eyes. One of them is this amethyst purple, and the other is a color called Pink Watermelon Infusion that I honestly actually don't use for anything else yet. I mean, I use the purple for all kinds of things, but this particular pink I just use for Andy. You can see what it looks like. I'll open it up. And it's sort of a shimmery, kind of, whoops, well, okay. A shimmery kind of watermelon pink. This first stage takes a lot of time because I only have 1 mold for each thing. So now that I've gotten watermelon pink all over these, may as well just do that. So I'm going to be making a bunch of this stuff in advance because I know that I'm going to use it. There's nothing exact about this. I'm just taking some soap. This is actually the last of a box that I'm using up. Dividing it up into 2. And all I'm going to do is just add mica to it to saturate the color, and that's going to be the end. But before I can do any of that, the most important thing that I have to have is what's going into this container right here, which is plain old ordinary water. I need to heat up some water because, oh, is this one stuck? Perfect. So I can show exactly what happens. This is my injector, and all of these molds are poured all of the molds for Atomic Eyes, and in fact most of the embed molds for everything, are poured using one of these injectors. But the problem is that sometimes if they're not cleaned out enough, you can see this one at the end, I can show you the tip, it's a little bit clogged up. These will clog, there it goes, okay. These will clog and not operate properly if they get soap in them that hardens. And the way you do that is you keep some very hot water all times. So this is the only cup, this is what I use this cup for, just for water for that. And I'm going to put this in for 2 minutes, which is enough to get it really hot. Alright, Gothy Winkles, in the interest of transparency and fairness, I want to tell everybody that it's the next day from when that first segment was filmed. After that point where it faded out, it went a little wonky. So we're going to try this again. What actually happened was I poured the Andy head backwards. So we're going to pour the Andy head correctly this time. So we have our water. That's what we start out with, right? And as you can see, these levels here are much lower than they were yesterday, because I've already done like 4 or 5 Andy heads in since, but I'm going to be doing one last one. Going to heat this up for about a minute. And in the meantime, I have my trusty bottle of alcohol. This is ordinary rubbing alcohol, as I've mentioned before. And I'm going to spray my molds. This prevents bubbles, and it also makes sure that the soap adheres to the mold properly. This injector is a different one from the one I used yesterday. This one has a slightly, and I do mean slightly, larger tip. The other one was causing me a lot of problems in terms of how well it was pulling the soap up, so I used a slightly bigger one this time. I don't really need the really teeny one for these particular details. Sometimes it works out that I do need it, but this isn't one of those examples. So as soon as this heats up, what we really want in this is for the soap to be rather hot, because the cooler it is, the less it's going to want to flow. And these channels in particular on these heartbeats are so thin that not having very hot soap causes problems. So going to start with the purple, which is what I actually always start with. It's actually not completely melted. If you can see that there's a big chunk in the middle that has not melted, but the rest of it is very, very hot. And so we're going to be able to work on this. We're going to draw it up into our injector. And the first thing we're going to do is Andy's hair. And we're going to just fill this in. And there's a bunch of little inserts that you have to be careful of to get all of that purple in there. I'm just going to fill it up so that it goes to the top of the area where Andy's hair is. And then I'm going to use the rest of it to fill up these purple heartbeats. Okay. And what we're going to want to do is make sure that we get all the way to the bottom with the injector, because if it doesn't fill completely, it's going to be a problem when it comes out. Also, I realize it's kind of messy. This looks like it would be a problem, but it's actually a good thing, because it makes for a little bit more stability when you're pulling it out of the mold. That flat area on the top prevents tearing, which otherwise can be an issue. Okay, now that that's in, I'm going to spray it, and I'm going to pink. Okay, I'm going to clear out our injector for a sec with some hot water, and then fill up once again with the pink, starting out with Andy's face on this left side of the mold, and just pour it right in there till it gets to the very top where they meet. Just like that. Okay. And then I'm going to, again, fill up these heartbeats. And as I said, you want to get all the way to the bottom and make sure that they are completely full, especially in the corners. And as I said, I know that it looks like it's really messy, but if you put a little bit on the top, it helps with pulling it out of the mold. You can always clean it up later. And again, with this smaller one, the smaller one is even a little bit more difficult, even though it's not as deep. Make sure that it gets into the corner, just like that. And all good. So now what needs to happen, let me clean this out, is at this point you can actually just pour directly, as long as you do it slowly and carefully, onto the right side here. And when it starts to flow into the other area, you stop and do it the other way. And you can't do this with every mold, but in this case it doesn't really matter, because the part that we're doing right now is actually a back plate. And this will make much more sense in a little while, but it doesn't matter that it's a little bit overflowing. It makes absolutely no difference. I can clean it up later. And any extra, like flash, that's around these areas, I can clean up and just throw back into the pot and remelt and use, so it doesn't get wasted. I'm going to draw some hot water into the injector, clean it out a few times. So it's nice and clean, and I'm going to pull the injector out and let it dry. Okay. So this is all that we have to do for right this minute. And there we go. And these just need to set up. They will take about a half an hour. In about 15 minutes, what I will do with them is pick them up from where they are now in the kitchen, and I will bring them into the living room where the air conditioning is and put it on the glass table, which allows them to cool off a little bit more quickly. It is quite chilly in here. I'm wearing a hoodie, but it's frigid in the living room, so it'll cool off a bit faster. So I'm going to come back when it's time to unmold these. Alright, it's been about an hour since I poured these, and now we're just going to unmold them. So I'm going to first pop these out. The best way to do this is to just basically push them from behind and just allow them to kind of fall out on their own. This is why silicone molds are better than the plastic ones. They're so much easier to unmold. These deeper ones, however, are a little bit tricky. You need to sort of release them in pieces, because otherwise they're going to want to break at the thinnest point. So you just do this gently, and then again push from behind so you can grab it and then gently pull it away. If you can see on this side, this is really the maximum thinness you can get out of a molded piece. Anything else that's thinner than this simply won't unmold properly. And if I put my finger behind this, you can see how thin it really is. You can see my finger clearly through the thinness of the piece. This is why there's a hard limit on how delicate things can actually be. And these really are it. Again, pushing it from behind, and then just sort of gently pulling it out. Where it tends to fail, although this one is perfect, is it will fail in the corners on the edges here where they don't fill completely. Where it will break, however, is usually right in the middle of this long piece, because it'll twist as you pull it out, and that'll cause a problem. The Andy heads are actually pretty easy to unmold because they have a lot of mass, and you just push them from the back and just hold them and pull them right out. And so you see this one is perfect. It has a lot of flash. That's okay. The flash is not a big deal. We're going to trim these up and cut them away, but basically any flash that you pull off you can just dump right back into the pot and remold it. But where you sometimes have problems with the Andy heads is this little wedge piece right here, because it is so tiny. And also this piece of his hair right here will sometimes tear and pull up, but in the end it really doesn't matter very much. As long as you've got good separation between the face piece and the hair, As I said, this whole section here is really just a back plate, and now you understand kind of what that means. I'm going to cut out this area behind Andy's eye so that it's just hollow through there when I do the cleanup of all these pieces. But essentially this is what we've got. So this is actually the last Andy head that I have to pour for this, but I do still have some more of these heartbeats. So I'm going to pour all of the heartbeats, and then I'm going to take the camera into over my desk into the studio area where we're going to talk about how these get trimmed and pieced together. Okay, see you soon. All right, everyone. So in our next part of how to make all of these Atomic Eyes soaps, what we have now is a giant container full of heartbeat pieces and 5 Andy heads. And in advance, I've actually trimmed 4 of the 5 Andy heads. Not that it takes a lot of time to do these, but just because I needed to get some of them done. So we have this Andy head, and I'm not entirely sure how well the camera will pick this up, but my guess is it won't. But there are actually tiny little dimples that are in this negative space at the back plate between the face and the hair, and those are going to become handy later. But right now, the only thing I really have to do to clean these up is take an X-Acto knife and just cut this flash that is right around the eye hole, and just pull it out like that, and you can just toss it right back in the pot, just to make sure that this opening is clear. And if there's any little bits of flash that are on the edges, you can trim those too. This one doesn't have it, some of the others did, but otherwise it's all pretty simple, just like that. The complicated part of the Andy heads will come later, okay? But right now we're not gonna deal with those at all. What we are going to deal with are these heartbeats, and I'm going to show you, just using one set of miniature heartbeats and one set of large heartbeats, what the next step in this process is. As I mentioned earlier, these were molded on both sizes, with one of the pieces being backwards, and this leads to kind of a problem in terms of how this proceeds. So the easiest way to do this in our next step is to arrange them so that they will fit together like this. Okay? So they're sandwiched in the correct... They will only fit together one way. So you have to figure out what that way is, and sometimes it takes a minute to figure out exactly how they're meant to fit together, but they will only fit together in one specific configuration. Right? So now you have this sandwich. Well, they're not connected in any way, so they're just 2 separate pieces that are going to fall apart right away. So in the microwave, I've got some hot water that I just finished heating. It's still boiling. I just heated it up before I hit play. And I have the purple soap that we used to make these. I also have the pink. It doesn't really matter which color you use in the end. It really makes very little difference. In fact, just for this one, I'll use the pink, but it doesn't matter which one you use. Just use whichever one you have more of, I guess. And I'm going to heat it up so it's quite hot. And that takes about, it depends on how much soap you have left over, but in this case it's going to take about 20 to 25 seconds to heat it up so it's really good and hot. And it needs to be, because we want it to flow very much like a liquid. Okay, so you can see this is really, really quite warm. I'm not sure if the steam coming from the top is showing, but this is hot. I'm going to draw it up into the injector, and I'm going to take the hot soap, and I'm going to just pour it right along all of these sort of edge pieces like this. And this usually gets a little messy. I'm surprised it hasn't gotten messy already. Right? And I'm going to immediately, there we go, going to immediately get the other piece. Oops. Did I do this wrong? I did it wrong. Yay, go me. This is why I said do it in the correct configuration. It only fits together one way. You have to figure out what that way is. Okay, let's try it the other way. Going to pour the soap in along the edges of all of these various parts like this. And I'm gonna, again, put it together and then push the pieces together as well as you really can to try to create a seal. And like I said, it will get messy. It's easy to clean. It's not a big deal, but you want to push it together so that these become a single entity that's now glued together using the hot soap. So this is how this is going to fit together on this mini. And I'm going to do the exact same thing on this one. I'm going to pour this hot soap like this. And then take this purple piece, and then again, where you want to really be concerned about it fitting, it being really tightly sealed, is on the ends and in the V of the heartbeat. Okay? And that's how you're going to do it. And it dries almost immediately. I mean, this is, now you can see it doesn't move or anything, and it's dry to the touch. So in order to make the number of soaps that we need to make, I need to do 9 of these miniature ones and another 9 sets of these large ones in order to get to the next step. This is not the only time we're going to be working with this exact same process, but this is the initial sort of welding together of these heartbeats. We're going to do all of them. I'm going to do all of them off camera because you don't want to watch me do this over and over again, right? Because that's boring as shit. And you can see they take about a few minutes each to do, but the thing is that the soap really needs to stay hot, and so there's only so many of them that you can do before you have to reheat both the soap and the hot water. So I tend to do them actually in groups of 3, 3 minis or 3 large ones at once. I'm just showing you one size and the other size, as part of this tutorial, but the way I do them in reality is to do like 3 of the big ones and then 3 of the small ones, and get them all done that way. And 3 is usually about the max you can do. So I'm going to get all of these done off camera, and then we're going to come back over to my desk and show the next step. Hi everyone, back again. So our next step in this process of making atomic ice soap. Underneath all of here are the Andy heads. They're all going to sit there for a while. They're just buried underneath there. And now we have like half of the pieces that we did before, but it's still plenty of pieces. Our goal at this stage is to take these hot messes and turn them into something that looks more like this. So in order to do that, I'm going to bring the camera a little closer so that you can see up close onto my work surface to show how that's done. Okay, folks, we have a fair amount of these to do. And believe it or not, this is not the only time we're going to have to do this. But I'm going to show you using these 2 as an example, and these 2, I guess, is what we're going to loosely call a control, to show what we're doing. The reason why I glue these together first is because by themselves they're so thin that there's no good way to cut them without them bending in the places where they're folded. So when you glue them together, you obviously have double the thickness, and because you have double the thickness, you have a little more stability. The other thing is that it allows you to get a little bit more of an even result, and when I say by a little bit, I really mean that. This is a sharp and fresh X-Acto knife blade. Don't do this with a dull blade. Don't do anything with a dull blade, but definitely don't do this. When these pieces just fall off, you can toss them back in the pot. They can be reused. There's nothing wrong with them. But in essence, what we're going to do is take this side first and cut it so that it is, I'm going to cut all the flash off so that it's level, more or less, with the purple piece that is below it. Sometimes this takes more than one pass to do. And then the other side, we're going to do the exact same thing. We're going to make it so that the purple is more or less level with the pink side. Right? And this might take more than one pass. It might not be perfect. You just go slowly just because you don't want to cut yourself, but otherwise it's really not that hard. Okay. So we did this with this one piece, right? And I want to point out, I'm hoping that you can see, that there's, even though they are glued together and they are one unit, like they don't fall apart, there are gaps. You see right here, this area here, there's some in here. If I flip it over, you can see that there's gaps on the back side between the two pieces and areas. That's why I say that this is not going to be our first try and our first trim at this, because what needs to happen after I'm done with all of these is that I have to take them back into the kitchen and fill all of these gapped areas on at least the front side, the side that's going to be facing down in the mold, which is this side, and it's this side, and fill this all in. And the reason that you do that is because once these go into the mold and they're filled with soap, you don't want either the clear soap that's in front of it or the black soap that's behind it to force these two layers apart, because it will just look unsightly. So again, I'm going to do this with one of the minis. You're just doing the exact same thing. You're going to take one side and more or less make it the same height as the other color, right? And this is mostly to do with the fact that I molded one of these wrong. They would only take half the trimming if I had molded them correctly in the first place, but I didn't, and there we are. So you just have to be patient. A lot of making Atomic Eyes soap is just ordinary garden variety patience. And again, you're going to mostly make them as level as possible with the color that's below it. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, but you do want to make sure that it's at least reasonable. Like, don't. You can see there's this area here where the sort of glue soap got stuck. You have to carve that out. And it doesn't have to be completely flat, but you want to make sure that you see both colors. That's more important than it being totally flat. So, besides that's the back side anyway, this is the front side. And I know that that's the front side because this is the, when you're looking at the soap in front of you, as it's facing you, if you own one, you can just pull it out and have a look. Heartbeats have a direction, and this is reading from left, your left to right, and the Andy head sits right here if there's an Andy head. But that's how I know that this is the top side. And the pink is on top, the purple is below, and the larger part of the heartbeat is facing towards the tail end of it. The very first time I made one, I made it backwards. And a friend of mine who's a doctor was like, that's backwards, right? So that's what you have with all of these. So I have 9 of these each to do. I've done a few already, if I'm honest. I did some already in advance. And you can see, like, there's gaps in this one also. It's very rare for them to come out clean enough where they don't need any additional filling. So I do have a few of these left to do. And once they're all done, then the mini ones, these little ones, once these are trimmed, I'm going to bring them back and fill it. I'll film that too and show the filling process, and we're going to trim them again. But once they're trimmed the second time, the mini heartbeats are finished. There's nothing else that you have to do with them. They're just waiting to be made into soap. The larger ones, if you're making the soaps without the Andy heads, and I'm going to be making 4 of them without the Andy heads because not everyone wants to shower with Andy, that not all of them will have the Andy heads, but there'll be 4 that don't have Andy heads and 5 that will. The 4 that won't, once they're filled and retrimmed, they won't need any additional work done to them. But the ones that need to intersect with the Andy heads are a whole other process, and those have to be done before we can go on and make the soap. So right now I'm going to turn the camera off and I'm going to go in and trim up all of this giant batch, this giant container of these heartbeats so that they all more or less look like the ones that we have over here. And then I'll bring the camera back into the kitchen so that I can show the secondary filling process where you get to all those gaps. Okay everyone, we're back once again for the next step in making these soaps. So I've trimmed all of them up, as you can see, all of the heartbeats. And I'm going to just bring this a little bit closer, and I'm hoping that the camera will focus on it. I'm not sure if it will or not. But you can see in this one, there's a gap between these 2 pieces. And at the top, it's not fully filled in. So those are kind of the things that we're looking at here. And the reason that we have to pay attention to them is because, as I said before, there's 2 other elements that go into this soap, and if either one of them gets lodged into the wrong place, then it fills that gap instead of what we want, and it creates kind of a problem because it spreads it apart, and the heartbeats don't look right. So I'm just bending down real low to sort of just fill in these gaps. And it doesn't really matter which color you use. I also have some pink left over as well in case I need to use that. But you're just kind of going to go along the edge here, along the line. And this is the front side, okay? The one where the pink is on the top and the larger portion of the heartbeat is towards the right. So I can also fill in the back side, but I don't really need to. In this case, I'm going to anyway because I would prefer that these be perfect. But if you're rushed for time, you can get away with not doing the back. You can see, like, just fill it in as best you can and kind of run a little kind of glue line along the edge to fill in any gaps. And it's going to be a little bit messy. There's no real avoiding that. I'll do it on one of the small ones to show you it's the same exact thing. You just kind of gonna take the warm soap. It's not really all that hot. In fact, I should probably heat it up a bit more. It's a little too cool. It's not flowing all that well. And you're going to just run it along the seam line on both sides after you remove every piece of freaking Rupert that's on everything. Stupid cat. And yeah, soap's not hot enough. Warm it up a little in the hot water. See? There we go. And we're going to just run along the seam line in order to fill in any gaps that have been left over. So I'm going to heat this back up because it's really not hot enough. You can see it's a little sluggish as it moves around in the container. And you really want it to be hot because then it will flow. And I'm going to carefully reseal all of these. And once all of these are resealed, then I'm going to go back to my desk for the next step. All right, everybody. I've now basically refilled all of the heartbeats again. It kind of looks like we're back to where we started, but we're really not. The next thing that we're going to do is basically the same thing that we did the first time, except that we're going to be a lot more careful about it. Going to very slowly and with great care, we're going to trim these heartbeats a second time. And when you do it the second time, you want to make sure that all of the little bends in the heartbeat are visible through throughout the entire form. You want to clean up any extra soap that has fallen into these crevices, because that will become visible as the bar gets used. It won't be visible at first, but if you're not neat about it, it'll show up later. It doesn't have to be totally smooth running down the length of it, because the bar gets used from front to back, but you do want to make sure that the basic form shape is intact. So in essence, you want to take out any little lumps that are too big. Doesn't matter if it's perfect, but you want to make sure that like here you can see there's this little notch here that's changing the shape of the form of the heartbeat. You want to take that out and give it a nice clean line up through that top. And you're just going to go over the entire thing, both sides, once again, and trim it very neatly to make sure that there are no gaps and that you can see both colors distinctly. It doesn't have to be perfectly flat. You can make yourself crazy that way and wind up shaving the whole thing off, but this is actually the back side. You can tell because this is the part of the heartbeat that is the back, is the tail, and this is going to your left and needs to be going to your right. So this is actually the back side of this one. And there's actually a little gap that didn't get filled on this one, and I'm not sure if I'm going to have to refill that spot again. It's possible that I might, but we'll see how it goes after the trim. I'm going to trim it down again very carefully. You don't want to rush this. You could really hurt yourself. Right? Go slow. And again, like I said, anything that's kind of a drip that's going to break the form too much as it gets used, you want to clean that out. And as you see, this one is going to need another shot of soap. You see this gap here? We can't have that. So I'm going to go, once I turn the camera off, I'm going to go in and I'm going to refill it again in that spot. I'll show you on one of the miniature ones, the exact same process. The minis actually tend to come out a little bit better because the surface area is less, so they tend to stick a little bit better the first time. But this is the top side. This is how it looks from the front, because this is the bounce and it goes to your right. And you're going to clean it up slowly, using some care. You really don't want to cut yourself. Take off the excess. I'm going to clean out this little V here, because that's got some extra soap that fell into it. Okay. And this one, right here, just a bit more. You want to have both colors distinctly visible. And this one too. See, right here, this one has a gap also. In essence, what you're doing is you're going to go through, I go through all of them, and then I tend to do them as I go, refilling them and then finishing them up. But basically, I trim out all of them, and then if I have to go back and refill them again and trim them again, which I have to do on both of these, I do that as well. I have to get all of these done before I can move on to the next step. Once these are done and they don't need any more work, the mini ones are finished. So are the ones that will not need the anti-heads. So I'm going to take 4 of them, which will not need anti-heads, and those will be finished also. And then, but the ones with the Andy heads need at least 1, 2, 2 or 3 steps more in order for them to be ready for pouring. So I'm going to go and take care of all of this off camera. It's going to take me quite some time. This kind of finishing process usually takes me an hour, 90 minutes or so, and then I will come back to show them and then move on to the next step, which involves the Andy heads themselves. Okay, it's been about 2.5 hours. It actually took longer for me to clean those up than I expected, but they are over here. They're this giant batch of trimmed heartbeats. So this is like an example of one of the big ones. They are not perfect, but they take so long to do. I'm just going to hope for the best because I just can't bear going through them a third time. The ones that are done for the minis, right, these are all finished. This doesn't need anything else, and there are 9 of these, which will make one batch full sheet of Atomic Eyes minis. And now that these little ones are done, they don't need anything else. But right now, before we do anything with the larger ones, we have to talk about Andy's head. You probably can't see this, but there are little tiny indentations that run down the space between the hair portion and the face portion in the back plate. And the reason that these are here is exactly for this reason. I'm going to take this T-pin, this long T-pin, and I'm going to shove it straight into these holes and poke it all the way through. Ow, right into my hand. A day without blood is a day without sunshine. Ow, motherfucker. So, pins are sharp. Be careful, folks. And I'm going to create these 4 holes that you can now kind of see on the back side. 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to go through the other side. And right now these holes are really not big enough to do anything with, which is why I have these sculpting tools, where I'm going to basically hollow out from the back side a kind of funnel. In 4 places on the back side of the head. Okay. Just like this, just scoop it all up. And if you're wondering what in the hell this is about, this has to do with how these soaps are put together. So I'm now going to go in from the front side with a slightly sharper tool, and let's see if I can do this. Which one do I want to use? This one. I'm going to go through the front and expand the holes, and really just make these 4 holes so that you can see right through them to the other side. And again, the reason why this is a thing is because of the way that these soaps are put together. The reason why this back plate exists is not only to just keep the hair part and the face part together as a unit, but it's there because there has to be a way to pour this space. Because right now, if I were to pour clear soap into the front and then lay this on top, there would be a bubble of air. This would go up like maybe a quarter of the way, and then there would be just a space, and and it would just fill up with air. There would just be a giant bubble. And we don't want that. We want that to fill up with the black soap that's going to be used for the main body of the bar. And the only way that that happens is if you fill it from behind and fill this area here, all of these negative spaces, with the black soap. There's no way to do it from the front because the head will be laying down into the mold like this, right? So you have to do it from the back. Okay, so now that you have those 4 holes, these big ones, you still need smaller ones, and they are between the nose and the mouth, right here. And these are smaller because there's not really a lot of space in these areas to work with, but you kind of just do the best you can, and you definitely drill out the back, because this is the back side where the injector goes in. And you wind up kind of just sort of piercing it through. And the hole is not that big from the front, but you have enough room from the back to get the injector in. And there's one here between the lips, right in the mouth. This. And again, just want to expand it on the back side so you can get an injector in it. And the injector probably won't go through at first. It'll probably get clogged, and you pull it out and just clear it, and it'll go through on the second time. And then there's one between the lower lip and the chin. And these are actually pre-formed in the mold itself. There's these long fronds that create the pilot holes to show where these have to go. They're in there by design because there's no other way to pour these areas and be sure that they've filled. So once I've drilled all of the holes into the back of Andy's head, and I have to do this 5 times because I have 5 of these. I'm going to take one of these large heartbeats, okay? And unfortunately, I can't do this upside down because I just can't. I have to be able to do it right side up. But these have to fit together, okay? Like in this fashion. And obviously, I'll flip it around this way so you can see. Obviously, this isn't going to work. They don't fit this way. They aren't 2 separate pieces. They have to be one unit. And so the way that happens is by taking the X-Acto blade and kind of lining it up right between the lips and scribing along the hair here and then along the hair here, and then cutting straight down until you hit right through the hair part, until you hit the back plate, just taking this one piece out, right? Okay, so that's going to create the notch on the hair for this to go. And you have to be careful because this little piece it'll fall off really easily. You have to make sure you're going the right way too. Okay, so it's like that now, right? I'm going to then take this X-Acto blade and score right along that line. And it's probably too faint for you to see, but there is a line right in the center that's darker, that's like thicker than the others in the mold, and it's halfway up. It's an artifact of the printing process, but it works out really well as a guideline. And I'm just going to take like a square chunk out of the heartbeat piece, and I'm going to, this will allow this to happen. Just like that. But again, this is not enough because these are now, even though they are kind of fitted together loosely, they are not a single unit. They are obviously 2 separate pieces that I can separate. We don't want that. We really need these to be one single piece. And so in order for that to happen, and primarily not only to have it one single piece, but to have them line up in a way that makes sense this way. Like right now, this is kind of is tilted down and you kind of want it straight across. The only way to do that is by going back in with the injector and using hot soap to weld this piece to this one in the position you want it. And so for all 5 of these large bars that I'm going to make with the Andy heads, that's what I have to do. I have to drill the holes into the back of the head, cut away that piece, and then take one of the heartbeat pieces and fit it using that method, cutting out like a little notch in both the hair and in the heartbeat to create a space for the heartbeat to go. Once all 4 of those, 5 of them in this case, are done, I'm going to have to go back in with the injector once again with some hot soap. It doesn't matter what color it is. And I'm going to weld the hair piece to this, the hair piece to this, and I'm going to weld along this seam at the bottom that no one will see, so it doesn't matter if it's pretty or not, up right here, to make sure that these 2 pieces stay together when I put them in the mold. Because when you pick them up and put them in the mold, you don't want them to be wiggling. You need them to be solid. You need them to be straight, because otherwise what will happen is they will shift position, and the heartbeat in particular will wind up at an angle in relationship to the face, and it won't fit in the mold properly. So we have to make sure that these are now going to be straight across in a way that's compact, because this is the width of our bar. We can't stretch it out. There's no more room in the mold. And then once this thing is welded together solidly and is one unit, and you have to make sure that you can see through the back of the head through some of these holes, that will be the point at which these embedded pieces are ready to create the larger bars of soap. So I'm going to be doing this. This is the next step that I have to do, and then I will weld them all together. The next time I'm going to be filming for this, I'm waiting right now on the black glitter-based soap to come in. I was actually almost out of it. I have nowhere near enough to make as many bars as I have to make for this. So once I get these together, it's going to be a couple of days. It's already in transit, but I will film once they arrive, and then we will finally have all of the pieces at that point together to create a full sheet of miniature bars and 9 full-size bars, 4 of them without the Andy heads with just the heartbeats, and 5 of them that contain the Andy heads. 4 of them will be for sale at Murder of Crows, and 1 of them is already been reserved for Mondana Templar. So that's kind of how we put this together. But once this is all together, you'll see that by comparison anyway, doing the rest of the pour is relatively simple. There is going to be some fun with injecting black goo into the back of Andy's head, but compared to all of the work that's gone into this so far, as soon as these are welded together, as soon as the holes are drilled and they're welded together, that means that the worst of this is over. That by comparison, the fragrancing and pouring and injecting is much simpler than everything that's been done so far. So I'm going to do this stuff off camera and get these 5 pieces ready, and then I will be back as soon as I have that shipment of black glitter soap. Okay, see you then. Welcome back, everybody. I'm going to do another small little segment. And I should mention that I started filming these segments on Friday. I think it was Friday. It's now late Sunday night. And I'm still not done. And I'm not even close to done with these. This is why I generally don't make these in bulk, because doing one of them is not a big deal, but doing them in a large scale is a crazy time-consuming process. But before I weld this piece here, this heartbeat piece, to the face, and you can see like that in almost all of the cases, actually, that little piece of hair at the bottom, it broke off. There's nothing to be done for it. It's just so thin, and the tension of this thing being twisted up against it tends to knock it out of position, but nobody really notices, so whatever. If you get one with a tiny little bit of hair at the bottom, congratulations. It's like a prize or something. But you want to test fit it into the mold, because these are obviously, handmade organic products, and they will warp. And so sometimes you get wonky fits where the heartbeat in particular wants to tilt, and that's kind of a problem. You don't want the heartbeat to be at a weird angle. And sometimes what that means is that you have to trim out a little bit more than you had intended on the heartbeat to give it a little bit of wiggle room in order to allow it to sit at a reasonable angle against where the face is. And you also might need to cut away just a bit more of where the hair is here on the Andy head up against the back plate, just to be able to get the heartbeat to sit in a way that, see, now it's straight up and down. If there's a little bit of an angle, like either in the head or in the heartbeat, it's really not that big a deal, but you see in this case, it's just tilted upward at a weird angle. That weird angle is not going to go away. So I'm going to take a little bit more of the hair going upwards towards the nose out of the equation to give it a little bit more space to sit. And that solves the problem generally. Okay, so these four sit okay. I haven't cut this set yet, so I'm going to do this one last as a demo. Basically, you can do it by hand, by eye, at least I usually do, because I've done them so many times, but if not, you can sort of just set it in the mold, and you can see, even with my just setting it down, that this particular heartbeat, right, this is the way it faces, it's kind of weird. It tilts up this way, and I can push it down, and it'll more or less stay in the position I put it. But by itself, without being manipulated and reformed, it's not really in a great spot. So as long as I make sure that I have it not upside down, which has happened many times, I'm gonna make the score mark here and make a score mark here. Take out the head, and this one is going to sit already up a little bit higher than the others. Each one is going to want to sit in a different place because, again, they're handmade and they're not identical, despite the fact that they're molded. You've manipulated them so much between sealing them together and trimming them and all that other stuff that they're like a totally separate entity unto themselves. And then going to score right there. And as I said, and I know that the camera is totally not picking it up because I've already seen this footage and it's really dark despite how many lights are on me. There's an artifact of the printing process that just happens to be right here, which is the center line of the entire thing. It's just and it's slight, but it's slightly thicker than the others. And it gives you a good spot to use as a guideline for how you're going to carve it. So you just take like a little piece out and then you just fit it just like that. And this one, the hair stayed, so there you go. This one, so now all of them, now we know, right, that they will all fit in the mold when the time comes, as long as they're welded together properly. And this is important because one of the most horrible experiences is when you're already pouring the soap bar itself and there's nothing you can do about it. It's already, you've already started, and once the process starts, you can't undo it. And realizing that it's not fitting in the mold properly and that something is going to be at some weird angle that you're not going to be able to do anything about, and you're going to wind up like brilliant mistaking the whole thing because there's no fixing it. But I do still have to drill holes in this particular Andy head and this Andy head. Those don't have holes yet, but I'm going to do that in just a few minutes. And then the next step is back in the kitchen where I need to weld these pieces together so that they become a single entity by themselves. And I can pick them up and they will be one unit. And that's really important because once this process gets started, you don't want to be messing around with multiple pieces. There's also no good way to fit them together. I'll show you what I mean. I'll just use this as an example. When this gets poured, which again I will film so you'll see it, but when this gets poured, you're going to see like there's a clear layer of soap that goes in at the bottom, right? Remember, we're pouring this backwards. So whatever goes on the bottom of the mold is the thing that's facing you when the soap is right side up. So there's a clear layer of soap. And then what needs to happen is that this thing as a unit needs to be dropped in to the mold like this. If these two pieces aren't together and I drop one, or if they don't fall in the right way where they get separated from each other or at a weird angle, once they hit that layer of soap that's underneath, they're stuck there. There's very little I can do at that point to manipulate them into the correct position. I can't just pick them up out again and move them over, because the mass of this head is going to cool that soap very quickly, and it becomes like glue. And that's actually sort of one of its purposes, is to hold these pieces in place so that the background colors can come in and not move anything around. So these have to be a single unit, because if they're not, and for whatever reason they get separated or jostled out of position, then the chances are pretty high that the whole thing is going to be completely screwed by the time I get to pouring the rest of the soap. And I'll show you with one of the Andy heads that actually has holes in it where we're going with this. So again, we're going to be pouring a clear layer of soap, and then I'm going to weld this together. I'll show that. But so this will be one unit, and you'll see why it needs to be, because now I'm already fighting with this, and I have to figure out how this puts together, and I don't know, right? And this is me just doing it test fitting. All right? So now we have all of this stuff here behind. Now we have all of this stuff here behind the Andy head, and you can see the holes in the back of the head where the injector is going to go. And those holes are there for the black glitter base that makes up the main body of the soap. So, like I said, this space, all of these spaces between the hair and the face and the space in the eye and all of that stuff, there's no way to fill them in a way that doesn't leave bubbles unless you can fill it from the back. And that's why there's all these holes that get drilled into the back of the Andy head, so that you can fill them with the injector. So the next step, as I said, is to weld these disparate pieces together so that they are each one unit. And as long as the top part looks good, it doesn't matter if there's ugly seams along the sides here or on the back or anything. It will make no difference, because as the soap is in use, that'll sort itself out. It won't matter. So it doesn't have to be neat, and it doesn't have to be pretty. It just needs to be freaking welded, and it needs to not be welded here at the top, right here in this spot. It just needs to be along the sides and along the back in order to create a seal that will weld them together completely. So that's the step that we're at right now. And I'm going to take all of these out. I'm going to drill the holes in the back of those last two Andy heads so I don't forget, and bring everything into the kitchen so that I can do that. I'm realizing as I'm putting the video together, because I'm putting it together as I'm going, that the unfortunate downside is that even though my kitchen is brightly lit, because of where the light is, it's causing horrific shadows, and I apologize for that. I don't have another light to put in there to fix that yet, but maybe in the future I can do something about it. It's a really bright light, but it's in a bad spot for where that table is. So you'll please forgive me on that, and I'll try to do better in the future. So let's go back to the kitchen. Okay, everyone. These are now back in the kitchen, 3 of them anyway. I still have to drill the other 2 Andy heads, but I forgot all about them, actually. I got caught up doing something else, and so we're going to do these 3 for now. I have my hot water, I have my hot soap, and I'm going to bend down real low, and on the bottom side, just fill in. Hi, Rerun. Rerun is helping. Fill in this area along the seam so that these will become one unit and get glued together. Again, it really doesn't matter if it's neatly done or not, as long as it doesn't fill up on the top, because the top is what's going to be visible, and as the bar gets used, the rest of it will sort of take care of itself. So just fill it in as best you can. Press down if you need to, whatever you got to do to fill in the gap there. And make sure that it's tightly, see what I mean? Tightly sealed so it will not move when you pick the entire thing up as a unit, and you want to make sure that it's straight, that the heartbeat is straight up and down as part of the assembly. So let's see if this has been done correctly. I'm gonna pick this one up slowly, pull it off the paper. Yeah, okay. Now I can trim this flash as soon as it cools down a little more, so it's a little less soft. But now, in this case, this is one single unit. I can pick it up, I can turn it upside down, I can do whatever it is I need to do with it. I just need to clean up the back side a little bit in order for it to be ready to be poured. And you can see from the back side that you can look through it, you can see through the holes, and that's exactly what we're looking for. So I have to do that with all 5 of these. These 3 should be done. Pick them up slowly off the paper. There you go. That's the second one. And here's number 3. I have to do them for the other 2, but I can do those off camera. And at this point now you have 3 full Andy head assemblies that are ready to go, and are ready now to begin the pouring process. I'm going to do the other 2 off camera, and when I come back it's going to be tomorrow at least, because I am waiting on a shipment of the glitter black soap base that makes up the bulk of the Atomic Eyes soap. As soon as it arrives, I can finish making all of the soaps. But for now, this is as far as I can get until that shipment arrives. As of now, I guess the video that you're watching has been going for over an hour. And if you can imagine how much work was done off camera, you can get a sense of how labor intensive specifically Atomic Eyes soaps are. But we're going to be back as soon as I have that glitter black. Everything will be cleaned up and ready to go, and we're going to pour the minis and a full set of the full-size ones. Okay, everyone, I am back, and the sparkle glitter black that I had been waiting on has now finally arrived, which means it is time to start the pouring process on all of these various soaps. So I'm going to film it all and I'll see how I edit it. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but when you do a complex soap like this, it doesn't have to be this specific soap, but any kind of complicated one, it's really important for you to have everything that you need before the final stage ready to go, and so that you don't forget anything. Because on some things it doesn't really matter. Like if I'm pouring like coffee sticks and cigarettes or something like that and I forget something at the last minute, it's not a big deal. But in this particular case, time is going to be working against us. So everything that I need needs to be nearby so that I can quickly move from one stage to the next. And I'm going to film all 3 of the things that I'm going to be pouring, starting with these minis. As you can see, I have 9 heartbeats, and the way that I've done this, I always set them up so that they are facing the right direction before I do anything else, because it's really easy to get confused about this when you're going in a hurry, and then the soaps come out backwards. So right now, they are all facing backwards as they face me, and they are upside down and forwards as they face you, because you're on the opposite side of the mold. But as they face me, they are backwards. So that this is the tail end that is supposed to go towards the right in the finished product, and this is the leading edge that's supposed to go towards the left. On where I'm standing, that's reversed. But I have to make sure that I double and triple check that, because otherwise they could come out backwards. So we're going to get started, and I have enough clear white soap, just not white, just ultra clear. This is the ultra clear base, to do all 3 of these pours in this cup. So this is not just for this is for all of them. But I'm going to heat this up. Okay, back. You can see that it's melted. It's also quite hot. It's not completely melted, which is fine because it needs to cool down just a little bit. It's a little bit too hot to pour because it is steaming. So we're going to let this sit here. But I'm going to spray the top with alcohol to get rid of some of the bubbles. And the first step is to pour a layer that goes somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of the way up into each one of the cavities in this mold. But I have to do them in sections because otherwise I run the risk of spilling the hot soap onto these heartbeats if I'm not real careful. So I'm going to do this one, 2, 3. Okay, and that's all I really need for that. I'm going to wait a second, spray the bubbles out of this one, and then I'm going to take the heartbeats and carefully just drop them in the middle, just like that. Once they are down, you don't want to mess with them too much. So kind of wherever they land, just leave them there, because once you move them, it runs the risk of the heat from the surrounding soap making them bleed. So just leave them where they are. If they're not entirely straight, you're just going to live with it. Okay, 1, 2, 3. So it needs a little bit more. Okay. Again, spraying it with a little bit of alcohol to get rid of bubbles. And then again, just put them in and just let them sit. Just try to get them in the way you want them. Don't mess with them too much. And be done with it. Spraying them again. And get these last 3 in. One's a little bit heavy. Okay. This one's pretty more than I wanted. I poured more clear than I wanted to, but it'll be fine. And that's it. And I'm just going to let those sit there and do absolutely nothing with them while the next part is being prepared. Just leave them alone. They're just going to do what they do. The next thing that I have is this tub of glitter black. This glitter black should be just enough to fill the rest of these molds. And I know it doesn't look like glitter black on the camera because the mica particles are so tiny in this glitter black. They are there though. In person you can see them. But they are not glittery enough, and because Andy needs more glitter than this. These are little particles of glitter. So I'm going to heat this soap up, and we're going to add even more glitter, our fragrance, and some vitamin E oil. Our black glitter base is melted. It's very, very hot, way too hot to pour. When you're doing layered soaps like this, you don't want to pour anything really below 130 degrees. Anything above that is going to melt the layers that are below it and cause problems, and cause breakthrough and things like that. So first I'm going to spray with some alcohol get rid of some of the bubbles. And where to put this? I'm just going to put this right on top here so that you can see what's going on. It's not going to fall into the mold. The first thing I want to add is this glitter, and this is some glittery shit, okay? No lie. This is called Iridescent Super Sparkle Glitter, and it is not plain at all. I'm going to use 3 big scoops and then I'm going to stir. And just because, oh, you know, that's not all, I'm going to add another 3 scoops. Of this crazy sparkly iridescent holographic glitter. Alright. So the way that I know how many scoops is that each 3 minis roughly equals 1 full-size bar. And 1 full-size bar equals 2 scoops of the holographic glitter, so that's how I know to add 6. Next thing is the vitamin E, 3/4 teaspoon squirts. Believe me, that those are roughly 1/4 teaspoon. You'll take my word for it. I could measure it out, but I know what a 1/4 teaspoon feels like. Stir again. And now we're going to start adding our fragrance. Atomic Eyes is 5 separate oils. There's a lot of stuff in here. So alrighty. So we've got all kinds of scents in here. Tangerine, apricot. We have a citrus blend. Citrus blend is a little bit hard to describe. It's a bunch of different things that are in there. I know this looks like a teeny little jar, but I have a huge jar of it waiting. I had gotten this one originally as a sample, and I wound up using it in this, so I ordered a big jar, but I'm not using it yet. This is our ginger and dogwood blossom. And finally, our super strength orange oil. This is pure orange oil, 10x strength. Okay. So now all 5 of our fragrance oils are in the mix. I'm going to stir it up. And I am quite certain that it is still too hot to pour. It's not steaming anymore, but I'm going to go and check it with my IR. I don't use an infrared thermometer for everything. I only use it for some things, but I do use it for complex pours like this. And as you can see, it says it's 145 degrees. So it is still 15 degrees too hot to pour. And this is just one of those times where you just don't want to rush it, because again, if you pour it at much over 130, it's going to melt that layer that we already poured, as well as start to melt the heartbeats and cause a giant mess. So right now, the best thing to do is nothing, and just wait here and listen to reruns scream, and just wait around for it to come down to temperature. So right now, if you were to check these, give it a little touch, you'd see that they're not hard. They have the thinnest possible skin on the top, but if I shake them, they are still liquid underneath that really thin layer of sort of solidified soap. So right now I'm just going to wait patiently until this comes down to temp a little more and this has hardened up enough so that it's got a thick enough skin so that I'm not worried about breakthrough. Okay, so some time has passed. It's been about 10-15 minutes. So now I've checked the soap that's come down to temperature, and it's about 127 degrees according to my IR. And I have to spray everything with alcohol. This is very important because the alcohol will allow the layers that we have planned to adhere to one another. If you don't add the alcohol, what often will happen is as you're trying to unmold them, they will split at the seam where the layers meet. So now that we've done that, the only thing left to do is very carefully pour the black base to the top of each one. And the reason why you can't do this quickly is because the harder the hot soap hits that clear base, the more likely it is it will break through. So you want to be very gentle about it and go slowly to make sure that your stream is thin enough not to cause that kind of breakthrough. I mean, if it happens, it happens, and sometimes it does, and there's not much you can do about it, but it's a thing you're trying to avoid. So if you can be careful about it and not do it, it's better to go that route. All that it takes is that you pour in a slow, thin stream, and you will eventually get all the way to the top on all of them. Once these are all poured, I can't do anything until they have set up enough so that I can move the mold. I don't have a lot of places that I can pour, so I can really only pour like a batch at a time until each one of them has set up enough for me to be able to move them out of here. So this is going to take between the time that I'm done with this and the next batch, I want to say about half an hour at least, so that this can set up. And I have just enough left that if I wanted to, if this were like the only thing I was pouring, to pour a few samples of this soap. This is about an ounce that's left at the bottom. It would pour a couple of samples, freebie samples. But as it turns out, I'm going to wind up using it in the next batch since we have so many to do. So I'm just going to pour it into, I'm going to keep it in here, and I'm going to take the next container full that I have for the next batch and just put it in here. And there's so little in here that the scent profile won't be off. It'll be fine. If it was a lot, then yeah, but this is just such a tiny amount that it won't matter. So I've got this next batch that's going to be ready to go, and these will be the full-size ones without the Andy heads that are going to be next. So you see that there's bubbles on the back of some of these, and I'm going to spray it with alcohol, which will immediately get rid of those bubbles. And it will also make the mica flow around, which is really pretty to watch. Okay, so that's it for these minis. I'm going to just let them sit, and as soon as they are ready to move, I will move them out of here and into the living room onto the coffee table so that they can be chilled down by the air conditioner. It's really chilly in there. So that's all that it's going to be. So I will come back when these are out of the way and we'll move on to the next batch. Alright everyone, back again. And I've moved the minis to cool in to the other room. I'm going to spray our large cavity molds. These are my standard molds, full size. If you've all gotten plenty of bars from these molds, so pouring the ultra clear somewhere between a quarter and a third of the way up. Okay. And once again, going to spray it with some rubbing alcohol to get rid of surface bubbles. I'm going to check the temperature on these. Just do one at random. And as you can see, this is at 139. It's going to need a few minutes to cool down. As I said, you don't really want to start putting things in them until they're about 130. Anything really much hotter than that will cause whatever you put in it to begin to melt. And we don't want that because the colors start to bleed all over the place. So I'm just going to patiently wait for a minute until it's ready to put that in. But in the meantime, I have this giant container of glitter black. I'm going to put it in. They cool pretty quickly, so this one is now at 128, which tells me that it is perfectly okay to do this. You're going to put the heartbeats that you have already prepared into the molds, and as I said, once they're in there, don't want to adjust them too much. Try to get them in as close as possible to where you want them. I mean, there's a little bit of adjustment. You have like a small window, but it starts to leave you pretty quickly because as soon as you put this cooler mass into this hot soap, it's going to drop the temperature of the liquid soap that surrounds it pretty rapidly, and it's going to start to form a skin. You don't want to move it at that point because you'll get wrinkles on the back side of the clear soap. Now, sometimes this is to your advantage. When I do a clockwork heart, I do that on purpose because it creates a sort of a varying lens effect where things are kind of warped and wrinkly and old and antique looking. But in a case like this where you want everything as smooth and clear as possible, once you put it in, you just leave it alone. You don't want to touch it too much. If it's off by a degree or two, or if it's not exactly centered, just let it go. Because the more you mess with it, the worse it's going to get. Okay. While we're waiting for this to cool down, I'm going to fragrance and color this. I've just added 4 squirts of vitamin E oil, and this is going to take 8 scoops, big scoops of hollow glitter. And I can't tell you, I don't know how much the camera's picking up, if at all, because I know it tends to be a little dark when I'm filming at night, just with the one bright light, but this is some glittery stuff. So I'm going to stir it up real well. And this soap is not completely melted. There's a big chunk in the middle that's not melted fully. That's okay. If it doesn't melt down while I'm doing all of this stirring and whatever, I'll just put it back in the microwave for a minute or two. But it helps it to, when it's not completely melted, it'll cool down a lot faster because there's still some cooler mass in there, which can help you if your soap tends to run hot. But in the meantime, I'm going to fragrance it. As I said, there's 5 oils that go into Atomic Eyes. So Atomic Eyes is a mixture of tangerine, apricot, straight orange, dogwood, ginger blossom, and a citrus blend. So there's a lot going on. Originally, Andy had just, to be perfectly honest with you, Andy just wanted me to remake Oopie, but with a different design, and I wouldn't do it because I don't remake scents like that. But when I mentioned tangerines, he loves tangerines, so he was totally sold on that plan from the jump. fine. Didn't hit the soap. I need very little of those, that 10X orange oil. It's 10 strength, and it's a pure orange oil. It's very strong, so you don't need a lot of it. I use it in Oopie as well. Okay. And that's all of the scent that we need. It's very important for all soaps that you stir well. I've mentioned this before. It's really important that you get all of the fragrance oil into the mixture and that it holds in suspension. If you don't stir it well enough, it will pool, and you'll wind up with these like sort of weird oily pits in your soap, where the fragrance oil has pooled and dissolved the soap around it. It has to be thoroughly mixed. And as I'm stirring, you can't see this because the soap is opaque, but there's that big chunk of solid soap that was in the middle is melting down really quickly, which is great. Okay, so I'm going to test this. Okay, and it's still, you can see it left a little mark there. It's still way too warm for me to pour this, even though this is just about at a temperature where I can pour it. It's going to need to wait a few minutes until a thicker skin has developed in the area around the heartbeats, because if I don't wait, what will happen is that this warm soap, even though it's really not that hot, right now it's at, well, it's got to be warmer than that. It says it's at 122, which is a perfect temperature to pour it. But I'm going to wind up probably needing to reheat it a little bit, because this is nowhere near ready for me to pour anything on top of it. If I pour something on top of it now, that entire clear structure is going to collapse. Like if you can imagine like taking a wet tissue paper and pouring liquid on top of it, the tissue paper is just going to tear. So right now I have to wait until this has developed a little bit more of a thicker skin so that I can pour the warmer soap on top of it without that structure collapsing. So, be back. Okay, back now. Again, it's been about 10 minutes, maybe a little less. And if I touch this, right, you can see that it's not really leaving, if I felt, it's really hard to explain. You can tell that the skin on top is thicker. It's not super thick, so I still have to be careful, but this soap is not that hot. It's actually quite cool. But before I do that, I have to, once again, it's really important to remember, spray with alcohol, and this will allow these layers to adhere to one another. Without them, you wind up splitting, especially in these plastic molds when they're not silicone. All right, so very gently, you want to pour to fill up. And you can see this is already starting to get a little too thick, and I was hoping not to have to reheat it because I don't want it to cause breakthrough from being too hot. But we'll see if I can get away with it, if I can go fast enough, really, because it's getting a little loopy. Again, same thing, just go slow. It's like really tempting to rush, but you don't want to go too thick a stream because you risk breakthrough. I'm actually pouring it on top of the heartbeat because the heartbeat is stable and the soap is not hot enough to melt it, rather than risk a bad breakthrough incident by it pouring and accidentally collapsing the structure underneath it. The soap that I'm working with is really not that hot. Okay, again, I still have some left over. You can see right here. I'm just going to use this for the last batch. It's really not that much. I proportion my recipes so that they make a little bit extra because I like to always have a couple of things around for samples, little freebies. In fact, this one is not quite as full as I'd like it. I can add a little bit more to this one to get it up to the top. These molds will generally hold about 6.75 ounces of glycerin soap. When the soap, the base does contain a little bit of water, so over time they will go down to about 6.5, but they won't go below that. This was kind of the problem with the Indiegogo. My calculations were based on 4-ounce bars of soap, not realizing that the density of the soap base would mean that it weighed more, the bars weighed more, even though these molds actually do hold 4 ounces of straight water. If I were to pour just water in them, they would only hold 4 ounces, but the soap base is so much denser that they hold a lot more than that. So these are just going to sit. They look very, very, I don't know how sparkly they look on camera, but they are crazy sparkly from here. I'm just going to take this last batch of glitter black and put it in here. And like I said, I mean, I just like to keep, I make a little bit extra, a little more than I need, because I like to have a few samples every time I make another batch, because I toss samples into all of the orders. Okay. And I think that that's going to be good to go on that. So as soon as these harden up, and again, this takes roughly a half an hour for them to be cool enough for me to move them from the position that they're in into the living room, onto the table. And I will bring back the one last mold along with the injectors and everything else so that we can do the ones with the Andy heads. All right, everyone. Once again, back for yet another pouring session, this time the thing that you've probably just been waiting to see and fast forwarded to. Pouring of the Atomic Eye soap with the Andy head. So, as I said, everything is prepared in advance. These are now facing the way that they need to face. And in this case of this one, I just want to pull it down a little bit to try to get it a little bit straighter. It kind of stiffened up in a weird position. Okay. I already have the clear soap melted, and I'm going to pour a layer of clear. See what I mean? I'm going to spray this with alcohol, and then I'm going to pour a layer of clear soap into the bottom of each cavity, not too high, for two reasons. One, because I still have one more of these that I need to do, so I need to save enough soap for that. This will be just enough. And the second reason is, if it goes up too high, it'll fill this area completely, and we don't want that. We want to make sure that there's a gap there so that we can fill it up with black soap. So you have to be careful on these Andy head ones, because if you go up too high, you're going to fill that entirely and you're going to have problems later. So these have a lot of mass, and you don't have to worry too much about the heat from them, of the other soap. They will just fit into the mold. They've all been test fitted so that they will do exactly that. And you just drop them in. Just make sure that they're straight, so they're not like in the mold at a weird angle. But other than that, see, this one wants to shift. There's only so much you can do about it. There you go. And you just kind of leave them where they are. You're going to spray them with alcohol. But other than that, that's all that's going to be done to these. These now have to wait until there is enough of a skin on them that they're not going to be broken through once the pressure of an applied injector goes into these holes. So that's the other reason why you make them a little thinner, because otherwise it's like an interminable wait for them to cool down enough so that it's more or less solid-ish, so you can move on to the next step. But these will take about, I want to say about 10 minutes, because that's really not a thick layer and there's a lot of cold mass sitting in there to cool them down, for them to get cool enough for you to go on to the next step. So I'm going to wait 10 minutes and be right back. Okay, everybody. In advance, I have melted the black soap, and I've heated up my hot water, because you've already seen me fragrance this twice before. You don't need to see it a third time. In advance, the temperature thing on these is a little tricky, because if it's too hot, it will melt the Andy heads as it goes through them. If it's too cold, it won't flow. So right now this is fairly liquid, but I have to tell you that there are some unmelted chunks in there. So it's kind of a trial and error thing. You kind of do it by feel. But I have my injector and I have the soap here, and this is the part that I guess everybody came to see, is me pouring black goo into the back of Andy's head. So I'm going to spray these with alcohol. I've waited long enough that they are pretty solid. I'm going to do them in a particular order because some of them are cooler than others. I'm going to start from this corner, I'm going to end at that corner, just gauging by how I felt them in terms of their heat. And the first, you just pick an open channel really, and you take the injector, you put the injector in, and just essentially push down, just like that. And that's exactly what you want to happen. You want the soap to find its way out. And if it comes up through other channels, that's not a bad thing either. It shows me that the area in front of those channels is now full and can't handle any more soap. So pushing it down and then applying pressure to create that result. And you just keep doing this into the back of the Andy head. This one doesn't want to go through, which tells me that the channel's blocked, but that's all right. That's why we make so many of them, in case one of them or two of them get blocked along the way. You can try this one. And you can see it flows right out into the main cavity of the soap bar. I'm going to try to clear the channel. There we go. And the fact that these are pouring out into the main body of the soap is exactly what you want to happen. You don't, it tells me that the area that's in front of the channel is full. So now that that's kind of done, and you've more or less filled up the area around the head, spray it with alcohol. I know it looks like a weird lumpy mess, but it's going to sort itself out in just a second. And then all you have to do is just pour it straight up. That's it. That's the whole thing. But you kind of have to work quickly because the soap is only going to stay at the right temperature for so long. I often wind up having to reheat the soap in order for it to flow properly. But again, right down into the back of one of the channels behind Andy's head, and just apply pressure to squeeze the black soap out. Pick a different channel. Same thing, this one's full too, this one's clogged too, that's alright. This one's not. Get that one over by the chin. There we go. And now you can see why I have to wait for them to be really cool, because if it's not, the amount of pressure that I'm applying to get this soap in to that front part where that bubble is would break through if it were not completely cool. The fact that it's coming up through the holes tells me that it's full, that nothing else can fit in front. That's a good sign. Again, same thing. Awesome. Okay, and now spray with alcohol, now that it's got as much as it's going to take from that, and just pour it over the top in order to fill it up. That's it. When I first did these, like the first initial batch run, I wasn't using ultra clear. I was using the regular kind of clear soap, and it wasn't clear enough, and they fogged pretty badly in the front. But since then I've switched entirely to ultra clear only, and that has completely solved the problem. So these smell really nice. Okay, that one's clogged. You can see that it's clogged. If you look at the tip of the injector, you can see that the injector tip is actually clogged. Gonna put it in some hot water for a sec just to clear the tip. There we go. And that clogging sometimes happens during the process by which I attach the heartbeat. The liquid soap will flow all over the place and kind of block up the holes. But it's easily fixable while you're working on it. And again, like once you've made sure that each of the holes anyway has gotten some bit of soap and that it is clear enough to get soap in all of them, and that there's soap around the entire Andy head. This one is not quite at that point yet, but it's getting there. What did you do today? I poured goo into the back of Andy's head. And then you're just gonna fill it up right to the top. Make sure it gets in the holes, fills those up. Now, I know that there's one more left in this mold, but I actually have two more to do, so if it looks like I have quite a bit of soap left, that's why. This is now getting to a point where the soap is too cool to really flow properly, which is a significant problem. It's just, if it's sluggish as I spin it, it's not quite liquid, it's kind of viscous. I'm going to throw it in the microwave for about 15 seconds. But in the meantime, I'm going to get rid of those bubbles. This one kind of has a little bit that's sticking out the top, and that hole's not quite filled. So as soon as this comes out, I'm going to add a little more to the top of that one. Okay, this is nice and hot now. Like I said, you want to make sure that the holes fill completely. And if it's like this, and you see how it's like multi-layered in the back, if you hit it with alcohol, it will break the surface tension and it will smooth out. All right, back to this. Much better. You can see the soap is way more liquidy now. Okay, that hole's clogged. You can see it on the tip. Gonna see if I can clear it. There we go. My hands are getting slippery. There we go. This is why I said, you know, time is kind of against you here, because as time goes on, your hands get slippery, the injector doesn't want to work as well, the soap gets to be the wrong temperature. But right now it's not quite full yet. And I know that because the back side by Andy's eye isn't really full. I'm just trying to find the holes. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to kind of hope that this one is full enough because it's really hard for me to tell. And my hands are so slippery. I'm going to fill this one up and just hope for the best. We'll find out what happens later. Overflow a little bit. Over time, these plastic molds warp from the pressure of your taking stuff out of them, and they'll tilt inwards. Tilt outwards from on the edges. So you kind of have to compensate a little bit. It'll harden up fast and pretty relatively quickly, so it stops dripping. The dripping isn't really that big a deal. As soon as it hardens, it's really easy to just pull it off of anything, but I don't like to waste the soap. Okay, so these are essentially done. I do have one more, but I'm going to do it off camera because you've already seen the process now. And when I come back, we will unmold all of these and see what they look like, and hope that this one did not turn into a horrible mess. Okay, everyone, going to very quickly show you the unmolding of these. First thing I need to do is stamp them. I don't normally stamp things here in the kitchen. I usually do it at my desk. The reason for that is because the desk is a lot more stable, but I'm gonna do it here because the camera's already set up. So real quick, let me do that. And then this is why silicone molds are great, because they make doing this so much faster. Plastic molds don't do this. They're a lot harder to get things out of. But these will come out real quick. Just like that. And you can see they're all perfect. Absolutely perfect. No problems at all. So I'm going to take out the samples that I made from the little bit of excess that I had. And I also have a bunch of little bat samples. As well, look how glittery those are. Wow. That's cool. So, wow, these are super glittery. Okay, so I'm just going to pop these out. These are nice shallow molds, so they don't really take that much pressure to get out, but they are harder to get out than the silicone ones, I'll tell you that much. And one more. Okay, so that's it for the minis and the samples, and I'm going to come back and show you what it looks like with the big ones and the ones with the anti-heads. Alright folks, back once again to start taking out some of these full-size bars. I've already stamped them because it's easier to stamp them on a flat surface. And these are the ones without the anti-heads. So, actually I'm going to do this over here. Just having enough of a flat surface really helps in this process, to be honest with you. Let me try this one here, but there's 3. And there is 4. So these are all 4 of the ones that do not contain the anti-head. They came out perfectly. You can see there's no fogging, there's no tearing, there were no breakthroughs on any of these. They all just came out perfectly fine. And we'll see what goes on with the next batch. Okay. So these are these are the ones that we did extensively with the anti-heads. This was the one that I was a little bit concerned about. I've already stamped them, and I've already actually loosened them all over on a flatter, more stable surface, so these shouldn't take too long to pop out. So we'll start here. Bazinga. Okay. And this one just fell out by itself. Okay, and this is the one that I was concerned about, this last one. See how it came out. Still perfect. The only thing that this one needs is a little bit of trimming around the edges to get rid of the flash, but otherwise it's fine. It's perfectly fine. And in fact, I'm going to go and get the very last one, the extra one with the anti-head. There was one more that I made. There were 5, and there's the last one. And actually, this last one does have a little bit of breakthrough. This is the only one that does, but you can see it here. You can see it in the area, in the negative space between the hair and the face. It didn't cover anything, so it's really not noticeable. But you can definitely see it here, through here. But as it turns out, this one was a gift and wasn't going to be for sale anyway, so I don't care. But this is the one that I did off camera. And this just shows you why it's important to really wait a significant amount of time before you try to add the black soap through the injector, applying pressure, because with the pressure from the injector, it shoots it straight forward into this clear area and can easily cause breakthrough if you're not careful. In this case, it really doesn't matter because there's no harm done. It didn't cover anything. There's nothing obscured. It's perfectly fine. But you can see clearly how it could have been a more significant problem if things had not been just exactly the way that they were. The areas in Andy's face could have been obscured, or some of the heartbeat could have been obscured, but in this case it just doesn't make a whole lot of difference. Anyway, this brings us to the end of this incredibly long tutorial. I have to go wrap these up and trim them, put stickers on them, stuff like that. These 4 will be available at Murder of Crows, along with the other ones that I've done tonight. This one is a gift for Mundana Templar, and so I know that this was an excruciatingly long video, and if you've been watching it all this time, I thank you for sticking with it. I just think it's important that at some point, you know, people see what goes into these. These are not simple to make. They take a really long time with many steps. And even if I had everything ready to go, like from start to finish, it probably still would have taken me 2 full days to really get all of these done, which is why I tend not to do them in bulk. But as it turned out, it took me 5. I mean, I started this video 5 days ago. So thank you for watching, and I think that the next video is going to be my doing All Hallows Eve, which is another really complicated one, though not quite as complicated as this. It's complicated in a different way. But thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you next time.